Tiap tanggal 20 Juli jadi peringatan tentang pendaratan manusia pertama di bulan. Waktu itu, langkah kecil Neil Armstrong dan Buzz Aldrin jadi lompatan besar buat perkembangan teknologi dunia. Tapi dari dulu sampai sekarang, banyak yang gak yakin dan nuduh itu cuma akal-akalan bikinan NASA aja. Jadi, benarkah manusia pernah mendarat di bulan? Pendeknya, jawabannya tentu saja benar. Oke, jadi ceritanya waktu itu zaman dulu Amerika Serikat jutek-jutekan sama Uni Soviet dan mereka bersaing dulu-duluan sampai luar angkasa. Terus siapa pemenangnya? Kalau soal yang pertama menembus langit dan mencapai luar angkasa, jawabannya Uni Soviet. Tapi akhirnya Amerika kepanasan dan mulai ngeluarin duit banyak buat bikin roket yang akhirnya bisa bikin mereka sampai ke bulan. Tapi kenapa banyak yang meragukannya? Jawabannya teori konspirasi. Dari mulai bendera yang seolah berkibar, gak ada bintang di foto bulan, sampai radiasi sabuk Van Allen jadi senjata buat orang-orang iseng yang nyebarin kabar gak bener. Tapi dari dulu, udah banyak banget penjelasan yang ngejawab tuduhan-tuduhan yang bisa dibilang gak beralasan. Dan sampai sekarang, meskipun gak mengakui, Uni Soviet yang udah jadi Rusia pun gak menentang fakta kalau memang manusia pernah ke bulan. Tapi kalau masih nggak percaya, nggak apa-apa. Ada beberapa cara untuk membuktiinnya. Misalnya dengan nembakin laser berkekuatan tinggi ke arah tertentu di bulan dan tunggu pantulannya. Ya, karena di sana masih ada semacam cermin pemantul atau istilah kerennya retroreflektor yang ditinggalin para astronot dan dipakai untuk mengukur jarak bulan ke bumi bahkan sampai hari ini. Tapi mungkin kita bertanya-tanya, kalau memang manusia pernah terbang ke bulan,
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
To nearly everyone, the moon appears to be a sterile, gray, unchanging world. But while the moon has remained largely unchanged during human history, our own understanding of it has evolved dramatically. Thanks to new observations, we now have not only unprecedented views of its surface, but a whole new tour of the moon that shows how both it and other rocky planets in our solar system have been shaped over billions of years. We'll start with one of the largest impacts, Oriental Basin, a feature that's as wide as the distance from New York City to Cincinnati. Using new elevation measurements, we can clearly see the effects of what is likely the last giant impact event in lunar history, with its outer mountain rings rising many kilometers above the lowest points inside the crater. The interiors of some craters in the moon's polar regions, like Shackleton, haven't seen sunlight in over 2 billion years. However, new measurements have created our best yet maps of these types of craters, allowing us to see deep into the shadows of this surprisingly young-looking impact crater in the south that's more than twice as deep as the Grand Canyon. Some impacts are invisible for other reasons.
You're looking at one of the most incredible moments in human history. That's Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon. Okay, maybe you've seen this clip before, but think about that for a second. They're on the moon, a celestial object nearly 240,000 miles into outer space. That distance is like flying all the way around the Earth 9.5 times. Millions of people around the world watched on July 16, 1969, as Apollo 11, carrying astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, launched from Cape Kennedy, Florida, and disappeared into the sky. It was the climax of years of preparation and research, and the pinnacle moment of the so-called space race between the United States and Soviet Union, a years-long rivalry to compete for dominance in space exploration. For the 8 days following the launch, the world awaited the return of the would-be heroes. So what actually happened between here and here? So let's start with the components of the ship that were discarded one by one until this became this. Here's the rocket that sent the astronauts into space, the Saturn V. The 3 stages of the Saturn V each played a different role in launching Apollo on a path to the moon. We'll get to that later. On top of the rocket is the actual Apollo spacecraft. It's made up of 3 parts too. There's the lunar module, the component that would eventually land on the lunar surface, the service module, which had propulsion systems for course corrections and entering and escaping orbit, and the command module, where our 3 heroes were for most of the mission. And last but not least, this is the launch escape system, which was designed to pull the command module away from the rocket if something went wrong during launch. Together, all these pieces made up the Saturn V rocket and Apollo 11 spacecraft. But it's the way they came apart that made the moon landing happen. The Saturn V's first stage launched Apollo, carrying the spacecraft 42 miles above the Earth and reaching a speed of about 6,000 miles per hour. The first stage then detached, and once the Saturn V's second stage kicked in, the now needless launch escape system jettisoned too. The second stage propelled the spacecraft even farther and faster into space, and after it detached, the third stage of the rocket fired briefly to knock Apollo into a parking orbit 103 miles above the Earth's surface. Here, final checks were made, and the Saturn V fired again to set Apollo on course to the moon, in a move called the translunar injection. Once the spacecraft propelled away from Earth, the Saturn V's job was done. Now, the astronauts needed to pull off a mid-flight maneuver to reconfigure the ship so the crew could access the lunar module, which had been stored in a protective compartment during launch. To do this, the command service module detached and flipped 180 degrees, docking with the lunar module and extracting it. In the process, they ditched the third, now useless stage of the Saturn rocket. This whole high-stakes launch process only took about 3.5 hours, and this, the completed Apollo spacecraft, was